You know, in the long story of nations, roles can shift dramatically. An ally can become an adversary. A savior can become a threat. But it's rare to find a contrast as stark or a history as deep as the one between Iran and Israel. What we see in the headlines today is really just one chapter in a story that started over 2,500 years ago.
And that entire story really pivots on one single staggering question. How is it possible that the ancestor of modern-day Iran, the ancient Persian Empire, was once given a title of honor by the God of Israel? Just let that sink in for a moment. Because to really understand the present, we have to go back and uncover this past.
So, Act 1 of our story. It doesn't begin with conflict. It begins with an unlikely prophesied deliverance, a moment in history when Persia was cast in the role of a savior.
Let's go back to the year 539 BCE. The mighty Babylonian Empire has just fallen, and onto the world stage steps a Persian king, Cyrus. Now, his conquest wasn't just another shift in global power. For the Jewish people, who were being held captive in Babylon, well, it meant everything.
And right here, the story takes a turn that just defies conventional history. You see, the prophet Isaiah recorded these exact words, naming Cyrus almost 200 years before the king was even born. A specific name for a specific mission, documented generations before it ever happened.
I mean, just think about the scale of time we're talking about here. A prophecy is delivered around 740 BCE, and it's fulfilled with perfect precision in 539 BCE. This suggests that history wasn't just randomly unfolding, it was as if it was following a script, one that was written long before the actors ever took the stage.
And the titles given to this foreign king, they're not trivial. Shepherd was a title that was reserved for Israel's own rulers, and anointed one, or Mashiach in the Hebrew, that's a sacred term. For the God of Israel to give these honors to a non-believing Persian monarch, that was absolutely radical. It was a signal that this king was a chosen instrument.
And what was his mission? Well, Cyrus issued a decree that allowed the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and, this is the crucial part, to rebuild their sacred temple. Without this act, the very heart of the nation might have been lost, and with it, the specific ancestral line through which the Messiah was prophesied to come. So in this moment, Persia wasn't just an ally, it was a preserver of destiny.
But roles in history are never set in stone. The story turns, and from within that very same empire, a dark shadow emerges. The savior becomes the threat.
And this is the paradox. Under King Cyrus, the Persian state decreed restoration. But generations later, under a different king, a Persian official named Haman orchestrated a plot for annihilation. The very same empire that rebuilt Israel's hope would soon seek to extinguish its very existence.
Now, this story of Haman is told in the Book of Esther. And it's a unique book, because the name of God is never actually mentioned. Not one time. And yet, his presence is felt on every page. A Jewish girl just happens to become queen. Her uncle happens to uncover an assassination plot. The king happens to have a sleepless night and calls for the history books to be read. It's just a series of convenient coincidences that completely dismantle a genocidal plot.
And that ancient threat, it seems to echo through time. After centuries, Persia became Iran, and for a while it was an ally of modern Israel. But then, 1979, the revolution. The ally became the adversary. The ancient plot of Haman finds a chilling parallel in modern calls to wipe Israel off the map. The script feels eerily familiar.
Yet, just like in the days of Esther, the story holds a counter-narrative. A deep belief that even when a threat seems overwhelming, there's a promise of divine protection that endures, a watchman who never sleeps.
But what if the story doesn't end here, in this state of perpetual conflict? What if both of these roles, savior and threat, are just temporary? The scriptures actually point to a final act, a radical reversal that, well, it's something few can imagine today. And it's the same prophet, Isaiah, the one who named Cyrus, who gives us this vision. A day when Israel, Egypt, and Assyria will be united, not as enemies, but as a collective blessing to the world. And just listen to the language God uses. Egypt, my people, Assyria, my handiwork, and Israel, my inheritance. These are titles of family, of intimacy, for nations that have been steeped in historical conflict.
And just to be clear, ancient Assyria covered much of what we now call Iraq and Syria, the very crossroads of the Middle East, a land intertwined with Persia, or modern Iran.
So this prophecy is speaking directly into the heart of today's conflicts. So this, then, is the prophesied journey. It moves from historic enmity to a highway of connection, and then to an unthinkable unity where they worship together. The story doesn't end with a winner and a loser, but with enemies becoming family.
So after this journey through 2,600 years of paradox and prophecy, we're left with one final question. Who is the true protagonist of this entire story?
From Cyrus to Haman, from an ancient ally to a modern adversary, Persia's role is incredibly dramatic, but it's always a supporting one. It is never the main character.
The true protagonist is the unseen hand that seems to be writing the script, the one who can name a king centuries in advance, who works through coincidences to save a people, and who promises to one day turn mortal enemies into a family of worshippers. Through all the floods of human history, the wars, the revolutions, the shifting alliances, the consistent claim of this narrative is that a sovereign king remains enthroned, quietly directing the story toward his intended end.
And so we're left with this. If history shows us that God could use a Persian king who didn't even know him to preserve his people, could he not also change the heart of the nation that now stands against them? The story, it would seem, is not over.